See, you wouldn't be a very good. So anyway, the sauce is all over the oven. It's gross. So anyway, everything's going to cost. So it's true. Now, there are a lot of opportunities in the medical world for people who are not wealthy. They're just not the owners. I mean, there's, if you're a good botanist, if you're a good extractor, if you're a good whatever, you'll have opportunities. And many people, one of the proudest moments we've had is when the very first grow house was hiring in the Keysport, Pennsylvania. There was pictures of lines around the block of people applying for jobs, and gave thousands of jobs out. So that's really cool. But the adult use is going to be a magnitude even much bigger than that. So it's a lot of opportunity now. How do we do that? So the first question is, given that we don't want only wealthy people to be able to participate as entrepreneurs, how can we do that? And so we came up with a system that we think is pretty unique and interesting. We have licenses, there will be licenses, and we'll talk about that. But we also have micro licenses, where you can get a micro license with much lower barriers to entry. And there are 3 levels of micro licenses. And to me, the metaphor is like a ladder to help you up the rungs of success, or whatever. So, for example, a tier 1 micro license would allow you to grow 12 plants. You'd still have to take a course and in how to grow, and you would still have to report where your money went. But if you could grow 12 plants at a time, that would, if you're good, that would average about 60 pounds a year. Okay, 60 pounds a year is a good way to start. If you do well at that, you can get a tier 2 license, which is about 50 plants. Okay, and that gives you a whole other. There's a few more requirements, but you can grow 50 plants. Tier 3 license is 150 plants. There's a few more requirements there, like you have to actually have a facility. Tier 1 license, you can use your bedroom. You could literally start with 12 pots in your bedroom and 12 seeds and start out. Now, it's not easy to grow cannabis that people want to buy, so you're going to have to know a little about what you're doing and learn a little about it, but we want that. If you have a micro license, you cannot sell to ultimate consumers. You can only sell to what we call the grid. You can sell to fully licensed growers, processors, or dispensaries. And we saw this in California, where people would literally come in and say, I have some that I've grown, and they would test it or whatever, and they would decide if they wanted to buy it or not. So the reason you can't sell to ultimate consumers is, again, the barrier. If you're only selling 12 plants, growing 12 plants, you're not going to be able to afford the sort of testing and labeling and all the other things that an ultimate consumer is going to need. All right? And the labels are very important. And I'll get to those in a second. So you can only sell to the grid. But that gives you a real opportunity, and my guess is, if you're really good, you sell a few times to a dispenser or a grower, eventually they're like, I want you to come work for us, because they'll either buy you out or whatever. So this gives you a real, and if you're selling 150 plants, if you're growing 150 plants at a time, that's a decent living. I mean, that's a 6-figure living if you're doing that well. Okay, they'll be competitive because you got to sell it you got to be good enough to sell it, but that'll at least give you an opportunity. We're not giving out guarantees, but we are giving out opportunities. So then there will be the sort of the macro licenses, and now in terms of social justice, a couple of other things. The micro licenses are really good for social justice. They're really important. They give people without any money a chance to get a foothold in the business. Another thing we're doing for social justice is we're erasing many of the injustices that occurred because of prohibition. So if you have a conviction on your record, or you're in jail for a conviction of possession of paraphernalia, or delivery, or attempted delivery of under a certain amount. We were at an ounce, but I think that might be a little low, and as we do the final language, we might raise that. But we're not looking to help El Chapo out particularly. But like if you, sold a few joints to your roommate to go to a concert, you should not have to be penalized for the rest of your life for that. It will not be a barrier to you getting a license for cannabis. Let me finish the sentence, and I'll take the question. Number one, Number two, these will be automatic expungements. Each county will be responsible for going through, finding the convictions and filing a motion to have those records expunged, which means as if they never happened, all right? And so we can end the suffering of people who were arrested for what we're deciding is should no longer be illegal. Yes, ma'am?
If you had just the 50 plants, the level 1, is there a safeguard for or against bartering with your neighbor, your best friend?
Yeah, you can't do it to other consumers. It's like now, for example, you can brew your own beer, right? But you can't sell it on the open market. Now, we will also have, just so everyone knows, home grow, which means you can grow up to 6 plants, anyone, for personal consumption. You can't sell that to anyone. That doesn't mean if your buddy, you know, let's just call him Lebowski, is over, you can consume it with him, right? But you can't sell it to Lebowski, you can't sell it to anyone on the street, you can't sell it to a dispensary. That is for your personal consumption.
Can he bring the pizza to the party you're at?
I'm sorry?
Can he bring the pizza to the party
He
you're
can
at?
bring the pizza. Yes, he can. Yes, ma'am.
So, I guess my concern, okay, is the fact that in the state of New Jersey, the bill didn't pass, and when discussed after they took the bill off the table for a vote, a lot of the legislators said that they didn't want to pass it because of the social justice aspect. Now, I'm in favor of this bill, okay? I just don't think it's gonna pass with the social justice aspect of it in there. Because that happened in the past when it was illegal. You can't go backwards and expunge somebody who did something illegal when it was illegal.
Well, if it was illegal because we wanted to control people because of their race, I think you can go back and say that was
I
wrong.
completely agree with that, but I'm looking at the fact that I want the bill to pass.
No, and I understand. Let me say a word about that, which is that in my medical bill, we had to negotiate. MP was heavily involved in that, and some of the other people. We had to negotiate. We didn't get absolutely everything we wanted. And I am a believer in progress, meaning if this is the goal and the ball's here, and I can move the ball here, maybe not here all at once, but here is better than here, right? And so I'm a believer in incremental progress. I'm a believer of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good.
So you'd be willing?
I'd be willing to negotiate that. However, keep in mind, there's also political pressure the other way.
Understood.
Meaning that, for example, in some states like New Jersey, if you get rid of the social justice aspects too much, you lose support of the Black Caucus. So it's a fine political line. To me, because again, these are nonviolent offenses. We're not talking about, if you robbed a bank and you had weed on you, you still got to serve the time for robbing the bank, okay? And these are, you know, most of the people who will be expunged have already served whatever sentence, whether it was incarceration, probation, community service, long ago served it. Not everyone, but you know, the problem is, it's very hard. You know, when there's a box, you know, and that's another bill I have to ban the box. But right now, when you go to a job interview and they're like, okay, have you ever been convicted of a crime? You have to check that. And if you have, and they can check pretty easily, so if you lie, you know, then you have a double strike against you. But many employers are like, oh, convicted of a crime, immediately goes in the trash can, right? So this is the sort of thing we want to stop. We want to start repairing minority communities which have been decimated by this. I mean, the percentage of young African American men incarcerated far more than in college, all right? So, and that's largely because of these sorts of laws. So we have to begin to fix that. I think, you know, I will say this. We didn't get everything we wanted in the medical bill, but one thing we did get, we're the first state in the nation to have a diversity provision in our bill, where you got points for licenses, and you could get points for your diversity plan. No other state had that when we passed that. So I think it may not be as much of an impediment in Pennsylvania as in New Jersey. Did you have something else?
I have a subsequent question.
Yeah.
when you were creating this bill, I know it's taken you years, because you've been working on it for years. As things have progressed in other states, have you looked at what has passed and are within their bills, such as Colorado, District of Columbia, Washington, and how New Jersey failed? Have you taken this into consideration as you've gotten to this point?
Yeah, in fact, we've met, and New Jersey hasn't failed yet, they're
No,
just
it hasn't failed.
stalled.
It just got taken off the table.
They're stalled, and they could come back on the table anytime. The House, the Senate, and the Governor all agreed to a bill, which usually is when it passes, but in this case, they've had some problems getting the votes, I think, in the Senate. We have met with people from all over the country. I mean, we've been not only to Las Vegas, New Orleans, Oakland, Miami, Boston. We travel all around to go to these conferences to meet with people and talk to them and try. So we've had meetings in our office with people from New Jersey and Maryland. We had long phone conversations with, who was the guy from Nevada? Was that Jordan Wellington, the guy from Nevada, who did this? We talked to the people in Colorado who did this transition. So we have met with people who have experience, we've met with experts, professors, whatever. We've met with stakeholders, and we've met with, just people, who just came in with a perspective. And so, and there's, they don't all have the same advice. I mean, that's the thing. Some person will say you should do this, and then the next person we meet with will say you're insane if you do this. And so, like, what do you do? So we try to sort of figure it out. And I'm not saying it's perfect. There's no such thing. It's like squeezing a balloon. You solve a problem, it sort of creates another one here. And then you have to try to deal with that. It creates a third one. So there's a lot to unpack in all of this, but we're trying to learn from the mistakes of other states. There was an article, I see, there's a question, but there was an article in the New York Times, I think last weekend, about California. California has a really big problem now with the black market. Now, part of it is they had legal cannabis for like several years with no regulations. So how do you do that? Like, all kinds of things sprouted up like mushrooms. And all these unlicensed vendors were popping up and growers, and no one could pay. And so it was very difficult to sort of put that genie back in the bottle when they passed regulations. So we're going to have like we did with medical, a regulatory process as well as a statutory process to have a market that's created in an organized way. And it's worked largely in the medical space. Doesn't mean there aren't glitches, but largely it's worked. So we're going to be meeting, and again, we're still meeting with people. We met with 3 people today. So we're still trying to figure it out. And we'll never get, it's like a Picasso, you never quite get it perfect, but eventually, he died, so that's what was there. Wait, no, I'm sorry. You had a question. You're
Yeah.
next.
As you know, even if Pennsylvania passes it, it's still going to be illegal on the federal level. At what point, with the number of states passing this, is going to be the tipping point where we can get it to be not a federal?
Yeah. No, you're right. And let me be very clear about this. It is still illegal. It's still Schedule 1 under federal law. Schedule 1 means that it has no medicinal value, which is ironic since they just approved, the FDA, the same federal government, just approved Epidiolex, which is a medicine from cannabis.
And it holds a license. I understand the United States government holds the patent, patent.
Yeah. Well, not only that, there was a guy named Irv Rosenfeld, right, in my office. The federal government sends him, what's that?
I can speak to that.
Yeah. You want to tell the story?
Yeah, so in 1968, there was a guy, 1969, this guy named Robert Randall in Southern California. He was a paraplegic, he had a co-op with some other people growing in their houses. They got raided by the DEA and they got arrested. They went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Robert Randall won the right from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that he deserved the compassionate use of medical marijuana. So since 1978, the federal government has been distributing medical marijuana continuously out of the University of Mississippi National Institutes of Health new investigational drug program. So when they say it's against federal law, it's a flat-out lie. That's like me saying it's against the law to drive a vehicle in Pennsylvania. Well, technically, you have to get the license. So a number of people like Irving Rosenfeld, who we, Philly Normal, invited to come testify at the medical hearing, a number of people joined the federal program and have been getting medical marijuana continuously since 1978. So all the attorney generals of the United States, it's a flat out lie to say it's against federal law.
Yeah, you still can't sell, you couldn't be
Well, let me
buying
just say-
seeds through the mail.
Well, Irv came to my office with the federal government sends him a tin of 300 joints a month. Because he has a type of bone cancer, and this is the only thing that keeps his tumors from growing. So, on one hand, they send Irv joints, and they approve Epidiolex. On the other hand, they say there's no medical use. It's just, there's so many irrational, I said early on, this is an irrational policy. It is an irrational policy. Another part of the irrationality is originally this was targeted largely at hemp because it was competing with other paper stock that was owned by rich people, and they didn't like that. And so they made hemp illegal too, and you can smoke hemp for days and you're never gonna get high. All right, and so it's not even an intoxicant, but the fact that it's part of the cannabis family, opportunistically they used to make that illegal as well. So it's been an irrational policy for a long time. It's still classified as a Schedule I narcotic, which creates all kinds of problems. Some of the problems include banking. So under federal banking laws, anti-money laundering laws specifically, the banks have nothing to do with Schedule I or money derived in any way from a Schedule I narcotic. And so when I first went to a dispensary in my life, it was in Colorado, we toured, and he was with me, we toured a dispensary. The first thing you do, you walk in and there's two big guys with guns. That's very inviting, isn't it? Why? Because all cash. They had a duffel bag in the back with $250,000, right, every day. And they had to, put it over their shoulder and take it somewhere. When they paid their electric bill, they had to drive to the electric company and say, here's $84.50 in cash, right? And so there was all kinds of kidnappings and attempted robberies and shootings. That's a terrible system. Plus, you're probably not getting every dollar of tax money if it's an all-cash business. Now some banks, I was at a conference in New York a month ago or something, and this guy gave a talk about some banks are renting out a room in their bank to another entity so they could bring it into the room, and it's all this shell game, and it's so dumb. Now some credit unions are starting and savings and loans are starting to get in, and it's like they'll give you a debit card but not a credit card. This is again irrational, and there's opportunities. There's legislation pending to fix at least that part of it. There's also other things. So the federal law says it's a Schedule I narcotic, but under President Obama, they issued something called the Cole Memo, which was by the Deputy Attorney General Cole, which said, as long as there's no fraud, we will not enforce federal marijuana laws on state programs. Okay? Trump, under Jeff Sessions, revoked the Cole Memo, but still has not taken action, started busting down doors and stuff like that, which they could do. All right, I think Jeff Sessions being gone makes that less likely, but that doesn't mean we won't have someone else who's problematic. There's something else in Congress called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which is part of the budget and passed into law as part of the budget the last 3 or 4 sessions. It said the federal government cannot use federal money to enforce federal marijuana laws on the states, which again, and Sessions asked for that to be repealed, but it wasn't. And we have the votes in Congress to protect that. So I think we have the votes in Congress. There's several bills. There's Cory Booker has a bill, Cory Gardner has a bill, bipartisan bill to deal with the Schedule I designation, which would change everything. Because it's not only banking, it's insurance. You can't travel across state lines, which is really problematic in some ways. And it creates, again, more stupid fictions. Like, for example, when we passed the medical law, you're still not allowed to bring it across state lines. So I guess the theory was someone would open a grow house, put a bunch of pots out, and just wait for cannabis seeds to magically, spontaneously self-generate so the plant can grow. Because you can't get them from any other state, right? And so again, why don't we have, at the very least, we should insist upon a set of rules that is rational. So we're hoping that look, I don't think it's a secret to people who know me, I'm not a huge fan of the Trump administration, but I feel like I don't sense he really cares about he doesn't care about what people do. I think he just wants to make money, and there's money to be made, so I'm hoping he just does that. The problem he has is his evangelical base. Is pressuring him because they view, marijuana as the devil's alfalfa. Or as my son calls it, jazz cabbage. People ask me, why is it so irrational? And I've really struggled with this. I've thought about it, I've read about it. I think a lot of it is because of cultural events, it has become conflated in people's minds with certain cultural things that they find troubling. So for example, in the 60s, people thought of pot along with like burning your draft card, burning your bra, and hippies and all that sort of thing. And I say now, like the average pot smoker now does not look like Jerry Garcia. He looks like Dick Cheney. All right? And so this isn't really about hippies anymore. All right? And so we got to lose that and just start thinking rationally. A couple other things about the bill, real quick. I'll throw in. We will be, if we pass it, the second state to have cannabis lounges. And let me thank you. We'll, and this is what I want to be very clear about this. I don't want cannabis to be one of the things I want to do in the bill is destigmatize. I do not want any treatment of cannabis that stigmatizes it in a way that. So, for example, there's these some of these municipalities have these laws, these ordinances. You can't have a dispensary within 500 feet of a church. I guess you can't pray knowing there's a cannabis dispensary 3 blocks away, all right? Meanwhile, you can have a CVS in a church and sell opioids. That's fine. That's fine. But God forbid you have a cannabis dispensary, within 500 feet of a church or a school or whatever. The other thing about that is, people are worried. I just want to put everyone's mind at ease. And then I'll finish the sentence, I'll take that question. And then, did I get your question yet?
Yeah.
You're next, and then after you. All right, but what was I going to say? I was talking about I have ADD, so it's difficult. What's that?
You're talking about the stigma?
The stigma, right. So yeah, no, we don't want it so you, in any way, yeah, I know what I was going to say. Some people are like, well, I don't want that in my neighborhood. Let me just say this.
It's anyway.
Not only that, you want it in your neighborhood. Why? It's like a casino. If you're going to commit a crime, don't do it in a casino. You're being filmed by 15 different angles at all times. All right? And same thing in a cannabis dispensary. There's cameras, there's all kinds of security, there's buttons for the police. In other words, it makes every neighborhood it goes into safer. All right? This is not an eyesore. I don't know if you guys, has anyone here not been to a dispensary? They are beautiful. I'm telling you, most of them are beautiful. They're amazing structures, right? And so,
My girlfriends went, but they couldn't get in.
well, yeah, but I mean, go look at them. They're amazing, cool-looking structures. They're not some alley you go down, And so it's a nice-looking building. It's very secure. It pays taxes, a lot of them. So, really, people want this neighborhood. I don't want any stigmas attached to cannabis. And so, if you can have a bar where you can go and drink alcohol, why can't you have a bar where you can go and smoke cannabis? All right? And that just makes sense to me. We also today we had a meeting about the delivery for medical and adult use. And delivery is a little trickier than ordering from Uber Eats because, there are, although you might do that after, but it's a intoxicant. You have to be 21, so there has to be an age thing. There's also liability issues, so you need someone who's insured and bonded, or can you hire a dude with a bike? And so, there are a lot of issues we have to sort of work through on the delivery. We want people, because certain people on the medical side are too sick. And the caregiver situation is a little untenable. And even on the adult use side, let's say someone used the example today of Spike Lee. You wanna go by, like if you go out, it's gonna be a whole thing. It's gonna be paparazzi and people tell you, look what he's buying weed, it's gonna be a whole, you just want it delivered. And so people should have that right to privacy, and it creates a new business of delivery. We just wanna make sure that people are not getting it, who are not supposed to get it. And we wanna make sure that people are, not getting something they're not supposed to get. But let me just say, this reminded me of something else I wanted to say, I started talking about earlier. This is important, then you and you, I promise. All right, then you. Okay, the label. So one of the things we're considering is we're trying to reduce the burdens on the entrepreneurs without hurting public safety. There is something now called seed to sale tracking. It tracks every plant. Now, in the medical context, that was important because of diversion. Like if I get, medical cannabis, we don't want to be diverting it to someone else, all right? It's less important in the recreational space because if I get some weed and I give it to my buddy, it's okay, as long as he's over 21, right? You're allowed to do that. So we thought rather than tracking everything so much and rather than requiring extreme testing at every stage, we would do what they do with other products and they do with alcohol, which is we wouldn't require any of that. We would only require one thing. When you sell a bag of cannabis or whatever form it's in to somebody, it has to have a label. That label has to say what the strain is, what the CBD is, what the THC is, mold, terpenes, any pesticides, anything. The label has to tell the story of what's in that bag. And if that label is accurate, that's all we want, because then people can see it and know what they want to buy. And so, how do we get an accurate label without requiring all that testing? Well, if you're a dispensary and you're selling something and it doesn't have an accurate label under our bill, there's going to be a heavy price to pay. First of all, you could be fined, and if it's a more than one offense, eventually you could lose your license. Plus there's the civil justice system. Plus there's the criminal justice system if you're knowingly defrauding people, okay? So, if all we want is an accurate label, we leave it up to the entrepreneurs to figure out how to get that accurate label, like we do with alcohol companies. We don't have a seed to sale protocol for potatoes when we get vodka, do we? We don't have, we don't test every bottle of Seagrams, right? But it says 80 proof, better be 80 proof. So our theory is, we leave it to you to make to have a relationship with testing companies and everything like that, and whatever, and it'll be a competitive market, whatever it is, and then as long as your label is accurate, you're fine, and we will know that because we will test it occasionally. We will have spot testing. We'll come in and we're going to take 3 or 4 of your bags here, thank you, and we're going to test them and make sure they are accurate, with severe penalties if they're not. So you can decide how you want to make sure that happens. You just have to make sure that it happens. And so we think that's going to be far less of a burden on most people, because seed to sale and recreational is just a lot of redundancy. And at the end of the day, there's also a new system of, someone showed me a sale to consumption with barcodes and stuff, but that's a whole other thing. We don't have to get into that right now. But there are some questions I promised I'd get to. You.
I was wondering, with this, decriminalization, so on and so forth, to put some dollar numbers on it, like for instance, Montgomery County Correctional Facility, it costs the taxpayer, $35 million a year. So if there's, say, 10% or 15% of the people that are in there now, that this would be forgiven, it would be a tax break.
You make a great point. And I alluded to it, but I didn't complete the thought earlier, because I rarely complete thoughts, it's kind of an issue. But I said, it's not the money we would get, obviously is the direct tax money we get from people who sell cannabis. But we'd also get the money from people who open up a marketing. We met with a person with a marketing business today, or a tracking business, or a packaging business, or a business that sells the clippers that they use, or the business that sells a certain type of light, or a business that sells a certain type of soil enhancement, or the business that sells, a certain type of wind machine. Apparently wind is helpful. I'm not really a botanist. But the point is there's all kinds of other businesses they would also, and they're never counted, all right? Then there's all the money we would save by not arresting, incarcerating, monitoring all these people for cannabis. I mean, keep in mind, it takes $40,000 to $45,000 a year to keep each person in jail, okay? Now, someone said to me, well, yeah, but you're not usually sentenced to jail for first offense for cannabis. That's true for possession, and when I say it's true, I mean it's literally true usually. Sometimes you are, okay? But even if you're not, you are often sentenced to jail for first or second offense delivery, even if it's a small amount of delivery, okay? And what happens is people are put into the vortex, and once you're in the vortex, bad things happen. So for example, let's say you're in a county where they don't typically sentence people to incarceration for small possession of marijuana, but you're arrested, and let's say the judge sets bail, and you can't make bail. You have to sit in jail. Keep in mind, 2/3 of people in Philadelphia are in jail not because they've been convicted of anything, but because they can't afford bail. That's why I have a bill to eliminate cash bail, which is a different bill. But focus, Daylin, focus. Squirrel. So there's that. Or let's say you did something else. Let's say you're on probation for joyriding. Well, you get caught with a joint. You're not being sentenced to jail for the joint. You're being sentenced to complete your term for violating your probation. Okay? So people are in jail in all kinds of ways because of this, and even if they're not in jail, they suffer in other ways. And even if they're just on probation, and we still have to pay probation officers to, and all that. So there's so much money to be saved in so many ways, and made in so many ways, that, it's not the only reason. If we wouldn't eliminate prohibition just to save money if there were a lot of other really horrible consequences, but here there are not. And let me just say a word about that, because one of the things we would hear is, Daylin, people always, for some reason, address me as if I'm a puppy. When you were in high school, it was a whole different type of cannabis. We're dealing with super double secret cannabis now. It's so much stronger. You'll never be able to, people jumping out windows. So, first of all, that's largely crap. I'm trying to think of a better word. Okay, it's like when they tell you that the little lobsters are sweeter than the big lobsters. That just makes people feel better about buying little lobsters. Okay, the big lobsters are just as good. This is another one of those. First of all, most of the cannabis from back then, we have no idea what the THC level was. Okay, there's no testing. All right, so this is a lot of it's now that doesn't mean there's not some strong stuff out there, which is why you label it, so you know. That, the argument that there's really strong weed out there is an argument for legalization, not against legalization. Because if it's illegal, you have no way of knowing, okay? But they say, it's totally different, you can't, and they say, and every once in a while, these groups cite some study where they're like, well, we gave a kid who's 7, we made him smoke pot for 16 hours a day for a year and a half. And it turns out he's in a bad mood, or whatever it is. Look, again, no one is promoting chronic use. First, my bill, you have to be 21. So your brain's fully formed, number one. Number two, no one's suggesting chronic use. Just like you never see on, an alcohol commercial, Budweiser, drink it till you're in a coma. They don't have commercials like that, all right? No one's suggesting that. There was one commercial. Someone who's my age may remember this. There's a brand of beer called Schaefer beer. Schaefer is the one brand to have when you're having more than one. That was actually their slogan. If you want to get really hammered, this is the beer you're going to want. So anyway, but no, and again, cannabis laws should not be written based on the most irresponsible person in the country, okay? Most people who use cannabis like alcohol. Someone comes home from a hard day at work, they have a beer, they watch a ball game, or they have a couple hits from a joint, and they watch a ball game, or they watch Animal Planet. But, you know, that's how most people use it, and that's what the law should be based on. But they'll be like, oh my God, you know, people, it's gonna lead to people turning into schizophrenics and all that. And like, we can discuss the studies, and that's, again, there's no way to clear a room quicker than that. But rather than getting into the technicalities of the studies, which I can do, I'm gonna ask each of you to do a thought experiment, a silent thought experiment, which is, because we're not asking for any self-disclosure here, but think of if you know anyone, including yourself, who's ever smoked cannabis or who smokes cannabis. And because of my lifestyle in college, and because of my involvement in the issue now, for me, the number is probably over 1,000, okay? Most people, it's less. And think of how many of those people have become schizophrenics as a result. For me, the number is 0, okay? And so you would think if this was a thing, I would be able to, you know, I can tell you a lot of people were in car accidents that I knew from alcohol. Okay, I can name a whole bunch. All right, yes?
I'm a schizophrenia researcher on the Harvard for Psychosis Project. I worked on it for 10 years. And every single one of the patients, I saw maybe 10 a week, was induced from marijuana.
Was induced from?
Their psychotic episode that caused them to have the break was marijuana induced. And or usually they were multi-users, so they would.
Are these people, I'm just asking because
They were young adults, so.
No, but what I'm saying is, and again, just as a caveat, I'm not a psychologist, my wife's a psychologist, but I'm not, or a psychiatrist, and I played chess at Harvard a couple times. But I will tell, are these people who had pre-existing schizophrenia?
No, so they were 16 to 25. We pulled from the Boston, New Hampshire, Rhode Island mainly. And they had a first psychotic episode, and we had an NIH grant for 20 years to study them, to see what, you know, we have no naturalistic studies to see what happens. And yes, for people who are neurologically fragile, we don't know ahead of time who's going to be fragile. It pushes them over the limit, and they would have their first psychotic break, and then we would follow them long term.
So it's not a temporary psychosis, it's a, turns into a mental illness delay.
Correct, most of them. So
You
what
also
happens
started
is-
to say something else, that they were on multiple different
Well,
things.
what was interesting is we would then find out like what was in their system, and a lot of them would also have used, you know, they were using other things. So
And
they
that would be
used-
very hard to isolate.
Correct, so how many of them were just marijuana? It was very difficult to
And
get
how many
that
would have
data.
been
Enough said.
Other drugs?
Well, we don't know, that's the issue is with schizophrenia, we don't know.
Would these studies include any control groups, see how many of them would have had it twisted?
No, because you can't control, we now know that there are genes implicated in schizophrenia, that it tends to run in families, et cetera. But, so we don't know who's fragile and who would be most,
But, so it wasn't independent statement.
no, because you can't, there's no marker to
Bad data.
determine who would be, I mean, we're doing MRI studies. There's Stacy Gruber, I don't know if have you gone to talk to Stacy at Harvard?
No, I've
She's a friend of
not.
mine who.
I'd be interested.
She does the MRI studies on marijuana and adolescents, that's her.
Well, so I have a number of questions, and I want to, but, and again, you know far more about this than I do, you know, but it seems, are these people, are you saying that they're perfectly fine and they smoke marijuana and suddenly they're?
Yeah, so we don't know, so you can get 100 kids and they can smoke marijuana at age 16, and you're gonna get 2 to 5% of them are gonna have a psychotic reaction and have a very difficult time, and some of them we could not get even stabilized with our new drugs at the time, clozaril, olanzapine, risperidone, Seroquel, we could not get them out of psychotic. Then you have others who will maybe have a psychotic episode and they might come out and then now, start to get paranoid, delusional, et cetera, hearing voices, et cetera. But you don't know, the problem is you don't know, of the 100 kids who smoke, who's going to
Because, and the reason I say this, when I
What
was.
about 100 kids who don't smoke? What's
Yes,
the-
and there
I
are,
was gonna
correct,
ask that.
there are, right, then there is, right. the-
There's people who never
schizophrenia-
smoke who get schizophrenia.
Correct, and you do, we think that it tends to neurologically precipitate.
Many of these kids
an
are
episode.
dead.
Well, let me just say this, all I know, I mean, obviously I've read the reports and studies and arguments on both sides, and that's why I try not to get into the weeds on the studies and stuff, because it's like everything, studies, they're, on Tuesday, there's a study that says green beans, if you want to avoid cancer, eat green beans. On Thursday, there's a study that said green beans are causing cancer like crazy. And so it's hard to know what to believe, and so forth. I will tell you, all I can tell you is when I was 16, 17, I was 16, 17 in the 70s, and I knew a lot of people who were just smoking pot, which would not be legal under my bill, all the time. And I didn't follow them all the rest of their life, but in terms of their career in high school or their career in college, I saw no one who did that, who became I saw people who decided they just liked weed better than going to class.
I've seen
And they,
LSD.
and they just literally just smoked weed all day and didn't go to class and flunked out of college. I did see that. But I never saw, I've never had a conversation where, I know it's anecdotal, but I never had the conversation where it was like, oh, Bill, did you hear about Bill? He became schizophrenic, or he's in the hospitalized.
I've heard it from LSD. but
Well, yeah,
every neighborhood has
LSD I
somebody
have,
come back from-
but I've never heard that from cannabis.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, it is, I would, in order for that to be, in my view, and you're next, ma'am, I see you. In order to impact legalization, I would need to see much more solid evidence of a causation, of a causal nature. The other thing I would say is that, and also I've heard that there are people who use alcohol just a couple of times and become alcoholics because they have a genetic predisposition. I don't know if that's true, it wasn't my experience, but, and so should that reinstate prohibition? My point is that, and let me make a broader point, okay. The broader point is, one of the arguments we hear against legalization is, broadly speaking, marijuana is not good for you. And there are probably a number of contexts where that may be true, particularly if it becomes something that you do all the time and you're to the exclusion of the rest of your life, or it's covering pain that you never deal with, or whatever it is. The same reason self-medicating with alcohol is probably not good for you. But something not being good for you is not a reason for it to be illegal. Alcohol is clearly not good for you in most contexts. Cigarettes, we all agree, are not good for you. Onion rings
Yeah.
are probably not good for you.
GMO.
People should be able to, in my view, people should be free to make those lifestyle choices, fully informed, being told what the risks are. But I don't think the state has the role of, again, putting people into the criminal justice system because they're not living their life, I know some pot smokers who are also marathon runners, and, I know some non-pot smokers who are couch potatoes and, are literally growing into their sofas. And so there's lifestyles more broad than just one thing too. So if the state's gonna start regulating that sort of thing in a criminal justice vein, I think that's really risky. Let me do this, and if you have more to say, we'd love to hear it, because you're clearly the most educated person here on that sort of thing. So,
On the medical side, yeah, I also work in substance abuse.
Right,
so,
right.
I know a lot about addicts and.
but let me just say, I think you were next, right? And anyone else, did I call it? All right, well, let's do, because she haven't had one yet, let's do you, did you speak yet?
No.
Or you. All right, let's do this, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Remember that number.
Remember your number, 5, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll stop there, and we'll take new numbers, because I can't go above 5. 1.
I just want to go back to the social justice aspect of the bill and encourage you not to go light on that. And I can give you an example why we host a meeting that is around social justice, and we help people understand their criminal cases and walk them through this situation. And we had a young man who was 19 years old, he and his girlfriend, African-American man, white female, in a car, what did you call it, joyriding, smoking marijuana in a car on a Friday night. He got charges, she did not. He was facing possession, paraphernalia, and I forget what the other charge was. He called our organization and was worried about, he was gonna lose his driver's license. He's in college, he's a senior. He was worried about how to get back and forth to college. I said, I don't think you realize if you have a drug charge, you're going to lose your scholarship. You will not be able to finish college. So I got with his attorney and the DA, we all had a conversation, whatever you do, as far as whatever you call these charges, they can't be drug related, because this young man, who is a senior in college, has a whole host of accolades to his culinary exquisiteness. And if he is charged with a drug offense, you will stop his career on the dime. And so the DA agreed, gave him disorderly conduct, $300 fine. This young man has graduated, has moved on, is now working at the college that he graduated from, doing culinary, fabulousness all across, his life. So had he stayed on that path, he would not be where he is today, and that was literally last year, right here in Montgomery.
That's great. And I've talked to judges who, liberal and conservative judges, who were like, please do something about this, because I'm the person who has to sentence this guy to something, or this woman to something, where they're gonna lose their scholarship, lose their admission to college, lose their, athletic scholarship, or lose their opportunity to, a lot of opportunities. And so that's not fun for a judge, but in some cases, it's not discretionary. So, that's something to think about, too. Who was number 2?
I just wanted to comment on the study of cannabis use causing mental health disorders, and point out that although the study is very compelling, I'm interested, I'll look more into it, whether it's substance or even experience that alters the chemicals in your brain, I mean, this could be from LSD, from marijuana, to experiencing severe abuse. Anything that changes the chemical compounds in your brain can be a trigger point to causing any series of mental health disorders. So I dare say it might
Are
not
they
be the
causes
cannabis.
or are they catalysts? In other words, does this person have
That can
something
be
in
the
them?
trigger to, most people are predisposed to a mental health disorder.
Okay.
It can be from, you've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, you hear all the studies on trauma-informed care nowadays. Trauma can come in multiple ways. Trauma can come from using marijuana too much, trauma can
But
come
marijuana
from
can
blunt
help
force.
with trauma.
Yeah.
Yes, oh,
Well, let
absolutely,
me
I
ask,
agree.
I'm sorry,
So-
what's your name? I'm sorry.
Cassandra.
Cassandra? Is it your, just answer my, because this, I think is important. Do we know if people have I don't know, for lack of a better term, like a time bomb?
Predisposition?
Yeah, what the going theory is that people are predisposed based on their genetic makeup, and then they have interaction between exterior things as well as what they're genetically. But the issue that is difficult is to say, well, you can be predisposed, but the neurological dysregulation that occurs with using tips is the tipping point. That's separate from, legal, not legal, all these other issues, but medically speaking, you have a fragile kid. I mean, just like any other fragile kid who's neurologically fragile, and you give them alcohol, that's also, we would never give a child who, is neurologically compromised things that would do harm.
No.
And I think that we're not talking about that.
Is there any test for that?
Well, we don't, the problem is we don't know. I mean, we're doing much more work on understanding the genetics of having mental illness, like we are with the genetics of, everything else, dementia, Alzheimer's, all these other ALS. So we don't have that right now. I mean, we're collecting data. 23andMe is the one who's really collecting a lot of the data.
Did you finish number 2?
Yeah, I guess, my point was more just because that was such a quote-unquote scary statement to say there's so much evidence of marijuana being linked to schizophrenia. I want to point out that there's a lot more than just marijuana linked to it. A lot of legal things, a lot of things completely out of an individual's control too, to kind of make the point of don't let something like that sway you against the legalization.
There's also nutritional things.
Absolutely.
Has anyone ever heard of the tasty cake? Plea?
Tasty cakes?
I think it was tasty cake, or the Twinkie.
Oh, good.
Twinkie.
Tasty.
Yeah, this guy apparently went nuts and killed somebody, and it turns out he had eaten so many Twinkies, he was crazed on sugar. So, you know.
It is bad for you.
It's addicting personality, it's not addicting substances. People got a hold of themselves, they need to fill with something, they'll do it.
Or like, when I was in college, because I was young and immature, as opposed to the paragon of maturity you see before you today. We would, me and my buddies and in our dorms, we would drink a lot. Like 3 or 4 nights a week, we would do shots. And then I went to summer camp to teach tennis over the summer, and I just stopped. So I clearly don't have like an alcoholic predisposition. But, some people would have become alcoholics under their circumstances. So I just don't, I wish there was it'd be nice if eventually there's a way to test people the way we test them for, like
Self-confidence, I think.
or the APGAR test,
I
or
think the whole
something
thing
like
is
that.
self-confidence, bullying, people get bullied and they escape. I don't know, I'm 73 years old, so I don't know.
But you did once. All right, number 3.
Here I am.
Yes.
I got a couple questions, and I guess you're the man to ask, but I appreciate the social justice component of the bill, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, basically is people to be able to become growers and sell it to dispensaries and things of that nature. Is there any mechanism in there to make sure that dispensaries don't pick winners and losers?
Who doesn't?
The dispensaries.
Dispensers are going to pick winners and losers, but it should be, because, the theory is they do it based on their economic benefit, so they pick winners based on like, this guy grows really good stuff, this guy
Right, is there
grows crap.
something there to make sure that actually happens?
Well, why would, and I'm just asking, but why would a dispensary do something, why would they buy the less good product when they have to resell it? They don't make any money unless they resell it. Why would they want to buy the best they can?
There's a lot of things in this world. You're talking about business and you're talking about different cultures and races. There are a lot of things that can come into play. When people do go, as you're in politics, they go against their own financial interests for certain reasons.
Yeah, but at the same
So
time, you have a
I would love if there was some type of.
Like, what would you suggest?
Basically, like you said, like, what I was thinking is if you grow it, you guys would take samples and test it, you know the purity of it and the strength of it. And then you guys would potentially, if someone brings up a complaint that no one's buying it knows good quality, you guys can therefore test if it's good quality, you say, look, you gotta buy it.
I guess you could do that like with a floor. There's still other things other than like, amount of THC. Like, for example, let's say I grow a strain that tastes like tangerine.
Right.
Right, that's,
Acapulco Gold.
yeah, or whatever. Let's go with that. But no, they literally can do that now, like it smells like tangerine. And that's, like, I think my customers will really like that. Whereas like smelling like Brut by Fabergé, maybe not. So, it's gotta, I don't know how you do that. Maybe you can establish minimums and within the context of a minimum,
Well, look, it's kind of like you have a clearinghouse, in a sense. People grow their stuff, they take it here, it gets tested, and they say, hey, listen, here's a different strain, and you sell it to the.
so it's like on consignment. If someone buys your strain, then you get the money. If
Because
someone
the
doesn't, then you
people
don't.
buying it
Like
don't
an
know where it's coming
exchange.
from. That levels the playing field. It does.
Does anyone here know the dispensary business well? If you, yes, sir. Do you want to comment? This is a business question that I'm probably not the most qualified person to answer. Do you understand his question?
But they basically don't wanna pick up more product that they can't resell and make money off of, basically. They only wanna sell the
Yeah, that
the best
doesn't
quality
address
product.
what kind of, the question I'm asking.
Well-
Because like, the social justice is so that people and, diverse people have opportunity. But we already know kind of, there's not gonna be any diverse dispensaries because of the financial entry into it. So, yeah, right.
May I comment?
But then life comes into play when you're picking and choosing.
Yeah.
What is the
I don't know,
mechanism?
so something we'll talk about. I'm open to ideas on how, practically speaking, it could work. But I want to go in the order. We have 3.
I'd like
Oh,
to-
okay, go ahead.
I'd like to comment on what you're saying. My son lives in Colorado, he's a grower, okay? And The dispensaries don't discriminate.
Oh, no disrespect,
No, no, no,
that's
no, no,
just
no,
one
no, no,
instance.
no,
I'm talking
I'm just
about
trying to tell you, I'm just trying to answer your question.
Yeah,
Okay?
but that's not
I'm just
really,
telling you
that's
that
one
my
story.
son is from New Jersey,
That- I
okay?
understand
So
that.
so in Colorado, he's a grower, okay? He learned in the business, he worked his way up to grow, okay? And he's 27 years old, he's not that old.
Well, let me, listen, I have my
so-
own business, I run $1 million in sales, and people actually do pick things that's
Well,
financially not the
I will
best
tell you
thing.
from a weed perspective,
Yeah,
they're
but-
looking for the best quality, they don't care.
Now, I'm talking reality, I'm not talking about Wednesday. I appreciate you, but we're talking reality in the world that we live in
Okay.
today.
All right. Well, let me do this. I've been told we have 10 minutes and they're kicking us out. So who's number, or what are we on, number 4?
I have really two questions and then a statement. Can a grower within this bill also be a processor or dispensary?
Yeah, it's a separate license, but yeah.
Okay, that's just for my own. Are edibles allowed?
Yeah, under my bill, yeah.
Will they be stamped or will they be labeled? Because
read
in
this down
Colorado,
inside.
Vegas, and other states, they have to be stamped on the edible itself with the
That's
THC.
interesting. I don't know, I'm not sure that, some of these things are left to
Yeah, what the
regulatory.
THC level is.
Some of these things are left to the regulators. Keep in mind, most statutes are this, like on a major bill, most statutes are this thick and the regulations are this thick. So the regulators will get in and do that. What we don't want is, we don't want children confusing them with candy and eating 15,
But that's the
you
reason
know,
why.
20 milligram gummies.
So that's the reason in other states, they have them stamped, so that when you see
Yeah.
them.
We want to do whatever
Yeah.
the best thing to do is to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Understood. So my last statement, and it is a statement, when we talked about delivery, I said, you mentioned there was some, looseness around that. Has there been any thought to having like you have to apply for a license, like here's your CDL license, you have to pass your background and everything else in order to be a delivery driver for?
Yeah, we talked about that today with a woman who came in and wants to run a delivery business. And we were debating, like, how much insurance should you have, or bonding? And what sort of liability were we even looking at? And how much of it would the delivery be responsible for? And how much would the dispensary be responsible for? And,
Well, the liability would have to be between the delivery driver and the dispensary, which is they're delivering for.
yeah, I mean,
So-
it seems like, we don't want to over-regulate it, and we don't want to create barriers where they're not necessary. You tell me what you think about a licensed, bonded company versus a guy on a bike, just like the guy who
I will
applies to
tell
be
you
a
that
pizza delivery guy.
I use a licensed bonded pet sitter. So, for me, having that aspect of it as part of my service is really quite critical to me.
Okay, and the licenses, what would you need to show to get the license? Just driver's license age or
Background check, yeah.
background check? Background check's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Again, I'm not sure, we'll talk about whether that's a regulatory issue or a
Yep.
statutory issue.
And it's the only thing.
Number 5, yes.
Do you have any idea how much the licensing was supposed to grow them?
The licenses are gonna be, we don't know exactly, they're gonna be far less than the medical licenses. Medical licenses were very expensive.
And just back to the guy who got 300 joints a month, is that what it was, 300 joints a
Yep,
month?
10 a day.
Okay, so, bad information a long time ago. One marijuana cigarette is worse than 10 cigarettes and it'll give you cancer and all this other stuff. Now, this guy is helping himself with the cancer. I mean, does it have any bad effects on your lungs?
Again, when I actually, can you?
I would say it would have manifested. Somebody running the program probably thought, if we're giving these people 300 joints a month, something's bad is gonna
Smoke
happen.
is
But it
smoke.
doesn't. It's not
But he
manifesting.
was terminal.
But there's
But
other
he's
people.
not gonna allow
It kept them alive.
For years, for decades.
Before they knew we had those Android cannabinoid systems.
Well, and I will tell you, there's things like tar and nicotine and other things that are in cigarettes are not in cannabis. Now, I actually stopped smoking cannabis when I got to law school, A, because I thought I had to study all the time, and B, I wanted to, I was running a lot then, and I thought just intuitively pouring hot gas over my lungs probably wasn't a good idea. However, I've been told, and maybe someone here knows more about this than I do, that the cancer rates from people who smoke exclusively cannabis, not cigarettes, are very low. I mean, there is not, we don't see the sort of
Formaldehyde.
dramatic increase in that. That said, again, Irv is a different situation because he's got a rare bone tumor condition, I would not recommend 300 joints a day for you. Okay.
One last thing, how can we support the bill? How can we
You got, well, first of all, you already have an amazing senator, but for those, we need a couple things. We need obviously other senators to get on board and representatives, particularly, and not supposed to be partisan, but Republican, because A, that makes it a bipartisan thing. We have a couple who we're working with, who are in the closet, shall we say, trying to bring them to the light. And that really helped in the medical bill when we got Senator Fulmer to do that. But if you know someone who lives in a district, they're represented by a Republican House or Senate member, meet with them and get them, because this is not, we've had 3 big polls recently, they're all 60% or north support, okay? Including majority support of Republican voters. So this isn't a partisan issue, and this is not even that difficult politically. So, you know, we just need a couple people to come forward. A lot of them have said, I'm with you, I can't say it publicly, but I'm with you, but we need people to come out publicly. So if you know some Republican reps or senators, or you have friends who do, get them to sign on to the bill.
Can I ask you a question that goes along with that one, which is just,
And then they're not,
can this be put on the ballot in November in
No.
Pennsylvania?
We do not have a referendum law in Pennsylvania. Only capital improvement projects and constitutional amendments are put on the ballot. Everything else has to go through the legislature.
What's the number?
So that's a different thing. You
My
guys.
question was about that, couldn't the legislature pass a statute placing a binding referendum on the ballot?
I think a binding referendum would have to be a constitutional change. We are constitutionally because it says all bills must originate in them. So we are constitutionally a legislative republic. We would have to change the Constitution to have, you know, so you can put, now some states, they'll have 20 different ballot initiatives in election. Some of them are inconsistent too, which is great. And, you know, do you want to raise the minimum wage? Do you want to eliminate the minimum wage? Yes! So what do you do then? But there's some issues there. But right now, we have to go through the legislature.
What I'm saying is, if you can place one thing on the referendum on the ballot, is there, I don't remember any constitutional limiting you would place more than one type of referendum on the ballot.
Well, the Constitution does say that constitutional amendments have to be on the ballot and capital improvement projects, and that's why they go on the ballot. However, I think there are some case law, it may be a couple decades old, that says there is no other issue unless you enumerate it in the Constitution. So, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going to take 1 minute of your time, I promise. I'm going to deviate slightly from this bill that's very important that Senator Leach is supporting and is introduced to another bill that is of profound importance to all of us here, to our families and to our communities and to our schools. There is a state law that mandates every kid K through 12 be immunized before they, in September, before they begin school, with 3 exemptions. One is a religious exemption, one is a philosophical exemption, and one is the medical exemption. Senator Leach has introduced the Leach bill, appropriately named.
Cleverly named.
Eponymously named. This bill that he's introduced will eliminate the religious and the philosophical exemption. My name is Carol Felton Shore, and I'm an advocate, and I work with several Pennsylvania organizations like Montgomery County Immunization Coalition. We advocate and we educate people on the need for immunization. There is no reason at all to have such a vague description such as these religious philosophical issues. There is a medical exemption, and that Senator Leach is not advocating that we don't have that exemption, and that's necessary. But it's very important, I know you've all heard about the measles epidemic, that is absolutely a scourge everywhere. They're closing in on 800 cases. Never in 25 years in this country have we had this. And let me tell you, measles is deadly. And there are babies that are sick and have died from measles, pertussis, these kinds of issues. We want to keep our families safe. We want to keep our community safe. We want to be safe and healthy ourselves. So I'm just asking you to please support Senator Leach's bill. I don't know the name of it officially, but so far it's called the Leach bill. It is vitally important that we eliminate these vague excuses why children can walk around school and carry diseases, especially when we have children that are medically fragile, that have not even been diagnosed yet, who have compromised immune systems, who can be deadly affected by this. When people have measles, I want you to understand this is an airborne virus, and it stays in the air for days. Every place this kid goes, whether it's the cleaners, the Acme, school, home, community playground, wherever, that measles virus is present. So please, 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 when you hear about this bill, and perhaps Senator Leach can contact us later or get in touch with you, please support this bill. It is so important, and it means a great deal to all of us.
No,
Thank you
it's
for
whatever
letting
the
me.
doctor says. All right, I apologize for, when they were telling us we must.
Thank you for
We
letting me.
promised them we'd be out by 7:30, it's 7:29.
Thank you. for letting
Thank
me.
you so much for coming, and there'll be more of these. We're having one in Whitby next week, if you didn't hear me enough. But I'm really grateful for you taking the time. All right, guys. Thank you.